You came back. Good. Pull up a chair and try not to make a sound. This is the last whisper. Daniel Price moved into a renovated apartment with a marble kitchen island that had one thin red vein running through the middle. At first he thought it was beautiful. Then every small cut, every nosebleed, every dead thing in the apartment found its way to that line. A week later he learned the stone had once been part of an illegal anatomy theater where bodies were opened for private audiences. By the time names started appearing under the marble, Daniel understood the rule. The stone did not just want blood, it remembered everyone who gave it any. This happened in a renovated apartment building on the north side of Chicago, in a neighborhood full of old brick buildings, expensive coffee shops, and landlords who used the word historic whenever they meant inconvenient. Daniel Price was 32. He worked in commercial insurance, which meant he spent most of his week reading reports about fires, falls, broken pipes, workplace injuries, and all the ordinary ways life can go wrong. That job made him practical. It made him patient. It also made him very hard to scare. He moved into the apartment after a divorce that had drained the color out of his life. The lease was only supposed to last 1 year. A clean reset. New address, new routine, fewer memories sitting in the corners. The building manager, Mr. Lasky, gave him the tour on a gray Saturday morning. Mr. Lasky was thin, cheerful, and always slightly out of breath, as if he had been running from one maintenance problem to the next for 20 years. He showed Daniel the new floors, the fresh paint, the bathroom tile, the appliances, and finally the kitchen island. The island looked too expensive for the apartment. It was a heavy slab of pale marble, polished smooth, with black flecks buried inside it like ash. Across the center ran a single red vein. It did not look painted, it looked grown. The line curved from one end to the other, narrow as a thread in some places, thick as a pencil mark in others. Daniel touched it. The red vein felt warm. The rest of the marble was cool. That red line held a faint heat, like someone had pressed a palm against it seconds earlier and walked away. Mr. Lasky said reclaimed stone did strange things with temperature. He said the slab came from a demolished civic property and had cost almost nothing because the developer bought it in bulk. Daniel accepted the explanation. Ordinary answers are comfortable. People cling to them until they break. The first accident happened the same night. Daniel was unpacking dishes when a plate slipped out of a box and cracked against the island. He grabbed for it too fast and sliced the side of his index finger. Whew. The cut was tiny, a normal moving day injury. One drop fell onto the red vein. Daniel saw the drop flatten, stretch, and pull itself along the line. It moved against the slight tilt of the counter, crawling into the red like water into dry soil. He wiped it away. The paper towel came up with a faint, rusty smear. The red vein looked brighter afterward. Daniel stared at it for a few seconds, then decided he was tired. Moving made people notice things that meant nothing. For the next several days, small injuries gathered around the kitchen. A staple caught under his thumbnail while he opened mail. A razor nick bled through a tissue while he poured coffee. A cracked mug pinched his palm. A dry hangnail tore when he reached for the fridge handle. Each injury was minor. Each one happened close enough to the island that blood reached the marble. The red vein always took it. Daniel began cleaning the kitchen more often, though there was never much to clean. He bought disinfecting wipes, lemon spray, paper towels, and a small trash can with a lid. The apartment still developed a smell after dark. Metallic, dry, faintly sweet. It reminded him of old pennies in hospital rooms. On the 8th morning, Daniel woke to tapping in the kitchen. Tap, silence. Tap, silence. He walked out barefoot and found a pigeon on the floor. The windows were shut. The front door was locked. No vent was large enough for a bird. The pigeon lay beside the island, one wing twitching, its black eye fixed on the red vein as if it had flown there on purpose. It gave one last kick and went still. Daniel wrapped it in a towel and carried it outside to the dumpster. When he came back, 3 tiny drops rested on the marble. They were several inches from the red vein. While he watched, the drops moved, slowly, patiently, with purpose. They slid across the polished surface and joined the line. That was the first time Daniel said out loud, to an empty kitchen, "No." He called Mr. Lasky. The building manager arrived with a flashlight, checked the windows, opened cabinets, looked behind the stove, and found nothing. He said old buildings had gaps. He said birds got into walls. He said pests could do incredible things. Then he leaned on the island and looked down at the red vein. "Beautiful piece," he said. "Odd color, though." He scratched at the line with his thumbnail. His nail slipped. A thin cut opened near the cuticle. Blood welled up and dropped onto the stone. The red vein drank it. Mr. Lasky saw it happen. His smile vanished for 1 second. His eyes went flat, almost peaceful. Then he blinked hard and wrapped his finger in a napkin. "Porous stone," he said. "Probably needs sealing." Daniel asked exactly where the island had come from. Mr. Lasky repeated the same vague story. Demolition lot. Reclaimed materials. A supplier outside Milwaukee. He promised to check the paperwork. Daniel did not wait. That night, he searched through salvage listings, demolition permits, old property records, and cached auction pages. He found the lot number. He found the warehouse. He found a grainy photo of several marble slabs stacked against a concrete wall. The listing described them as reclaimed medical marble. Daniel kept digging. The slab had been removed from the basement of the Halden Institute, a private medical school that closed in the late 1980s after lawsuits, missing records, and rumors that never made it far past local newspapers. One article mentioned unauthorized anatomical demonstrations. Another mentioned paying spectators. A third, buried in a scanned archive from 1936, used a phrase that made Daniel sit back from the laptop: the basement theater. According to the article, wealthy patrons once gathered below the institute after midnight to watch doctors, students, and collectors perform demonstrations on unclaimed bodies. The paper never printed the worst accusations. It only said the room contained a raised stone table, tiered benches, drains in the floor, and a private entrance from the alley. Daniel found one photograph. It showed a basement room tiled in white. Men in dark coats stood around a long stone table. Their faces were blurred by age and bad lighting. The table had a red line running through it. Daniel closed the laptop. The kitchen was silent. Then a fly landed on the screen. By morning, there were more flies. 5 at first, then 12, then too many to count. They appeared even when the windows stayed closed and the trash stayed empty. They gathered along the island in a long, shifting line. Daniel killed them. More came. He stopped cooking on the island. He stopped touching it. He walked around the kitchen with his hands in his pockets. The apartment felt larger at night, as if the kitchen had stretched away from the rest of the rooms. His sister Claire came over on the 10th day. Claire was older by 4 years and built her entire personality around refusing to panic. She brought soup, fresh bread, and a bottle of wine she said Daniel did not deserve because he still owned only 2 real chairs. Daniel nearly told her everything. Then he imagined saying the words "haunted kitchen island" and stayed quiet. They ate at the small table by the window. Claire teased him about his empty walls. Daniel pretended to be fine. For almost an hour, the apartment felt normal. Then Claire stood to wash the bowls. Daniel told her to leave them. She ignored him. At the sink, her elbow nudged the wine glass. It rolled across the island and broke against the marble with a clean, sharp sound. Claire flinched. A shard nicked her wrist. The cut was shallow. The blood was wrong. It came out steadily, too much for such a small wound, running down her hand and dripping onto the marble. Claire stared at it without speaking. Her face softened. Her mouth opened slightly. Her eyes fixed on the red vein. Daniel grabbed a towel and pressed it to her wrist. She did not pull away. She did not blink. He said her name 3 times. On the 3rd time, she gasped like someone breaking the surface of deep water. "I heard people," she whispered. Daniel asked what they said. Claire looked at the island and began to cry. "They were counting." After she left, she called from the parking lot and told Daniel to get out of the apartment until the island was removed. Her voice was steady. That made it worse. Daniel called Mr. Lasky the next morning and demanded removal. Mr. Lasky argued about cost. Daniel offered to pay. Mr. Lasky said he would inspect it after the weekend. Daniel spent that weekend awake. He slept in short bursts on the couch facing the kitchen. He left every light on. He covered the island with a blanket. By midnight, flies had arranged themselves on top of the fabric in the exact curve of the red vein below it. At 3:17 a.m., Daniel heard his name. It came from the kitchen in a thin whisper. "Daniel." He sat up and held his breath. The whisper came again. "Daniel." Then came a second sound, metal scraping across stone. Daniel turned on the lamp, then the hallway light, then the kitchen light. A butter knife lay on the island. He had left it in the sink before going to bed. Now it rested across the covered red vein, blade pointing toward the couch. The blanket around it had darkened in a long red curve. Daniel did not touch it. On Monday, Mr. Lasky arrived with a young maintenance worker named Aaron. Aaron was quiet, tattooed, and clearly annoyed to be dealing with a tenant who kept staring at a countertop like it might breathe. Daniel stood near the front door while they worked. Aaron ran a utility knife along the seal beneath the marble. The blade snapped. The broken tip skittered across the island and stopped on the red vein. Daniel shouted, "Leave it!" Aaron froze. For 3 seconds, only the flies moved. Then Aaron smiled. His expression became empty and polite, the way a sleepwalker might smile at a stranger. He pressed his palm flat against the broken blade. Daniel grabbed his wrist and pulled him back. Aaron woke with a shout, clutching his hand. Blood ran between his fingers and struck the stone. The red vein darkened from end to end. Under the island, something knocked once. Mr. Lasky backed away. Aaron stopped shouting. Daniel stopped breathing. Another knock came from inside the marble, slow, firm, like someone under a table asking to be let out. Mr. Lasky packed his tools and said professionals would handle it. Daniel blocked the door and told them nobody was leaving until they admitted what they had seen. Mr. Lasky looked at the island. His face had gone pale. "Some materials carry history," he said. Daniel asked what that meant. Mr. Lasky said nothing else. That answer made Daniel decide to remove the island himself. That evening, he bought a sledgehammer, a pry bar, thick gloves, safety goggles, plastic sheeting, and a respirator. He taped the cabinets. He covered the floor. He wrapped his wrists. He prepared the kitchen like a crime scene. At 10:40 p.m., he swung the sledgehammer. The first hit rang through the apartment like a church bell. The second made the lights flicker. The third opened a thin fracture near the sink. Cold air came out of the crack. The smell followed. Metal, alcohol, dust. Something old that had been kept clean for a terrible reason. Daniel swung again. The red vein split. The kitchen disappeared. For several seconds, Daniel stood in a basement theater lit by hanging lamps. White tiles covered the walls. Benches rose in rows. Men in dark coats leaned forward with eager, silent faces. A long marble table sat at the center of the room. The same red vein ran through it. On the table lay a covered shape. A man in a white coat placed a hand on the marble and spoke to the room. The table remembers every contribution. Then every face in the theater turned toward Daniel. He was back in the kitchen with the hammer in his hand, screaming. His gloves were wet. A split had opened across his palm through 2 layers of fabric. Blood dripped from his hand onto the island. The red vein pulsed once, softly, under the surface. Then letters appeared inside the crack. Not painted, not carved, forming from within the marble. Daniel Price. He stumbled backward and hit the fridge. The letters faded after a few seconds, leaving the red vein smooth and bright. Daniel spent the rest of the night in the hallway outside his own apartment. Claire found him there at dawn. She did not ask whether he was okay. She stepped around him, looked through the open door, and saw the hammer on the kitchen floor. Then she saw the flies crawling over the red vein in a shape that looked almost like handwriting. Claire called a private removal company. 2 men arrived that afternoon with masks, straps, saws, and the calm confidence of people who thought every problem was physical. Daniel told them the stone affected people. Claire told them to keep their gloves on and not to stare at the red line. The men exchanged a look, then saw Daniel's bandaged hand and followed instructions. It took 4 hours to loosen the island. During that time, the apartment fought them. Screws stripped. The drill died with a full battery. One man's nose began bleeding for no reason. A saw blade bent. The kitchen lights dimmed whenever the pry bar touched the underside of the slab. Claire stood in the doorway with a first aid kit and watched everyone's hands. At 5:28 p.m., the island finally lifted. Under the marble, hidden between the cabinet supports, they found names, dozens of them. Some were written in old brown stains, some looked fresh, Some were initials, some had dates beside them. The names crossed over one another, layered like a guest book kept by someone with no respect for the living. M. Ellis, 3 drops. Samuel Voss, watched. Dr. H. Vale, opened the first. Claire Price, wrist. Daniel stared at his sister's name. Then he saw his own. Daniel Price, marked. At the center, written larger than the rest, was one sentence. The table learns the room, then the room learns the people. Nobody laughed. Nobody explained it away. The movers wanted to leave the slab right there. Daniel paid them triple to carry it to the truck. They took it down the back stairs with straps under each end. Daniel and Claire followed close behind. Neither of them wanted the stone out of sight. The alley behind the building was wet from earlier rain. Evening had turned the brick walls dark. A delivery bike leaned near the laundry door. An old man from the next building was taking out his trash. A woman stood by the back entrance smoking. The movers reached the truck. One of them slipped on the wet pavement. The slab tilted. The red vein faced the alley. Everyone stopped. The old man lowered his trash bag. The woman lowered her cigarette. The delivery rider took one earbud out and stared. Windows opened above them. A man on the second floor leaned out. Someone came through the laundry door. One by one, people turned toward the slab. Their faces emptied. Daniel felt the pressure enter his head. It was gentle, almost kind. Step closer, give a little. The red line knows your name. Claire dug her nails into his arm and said, "Don't listen." The mover who had slipped raised his hand toward the broken edge of the marble. His eyes were open, but he was not there. Daniel shouted. The sound cracked through the alley. The mover jerked backward. The straps swung. The slab slammed against the truck bed and split down the center. For 1 second, the inside of the stone was visible. It was filled with names, not on the surface, inside it. Layer after layer of dark red lines twisted through the marble, forming names, initials, dates, and marks too old to read. They ran deep into the stone like veins through flesh. Then the slab made a sound. A long, relieved sigh. Everyone in the alley woke at once. The woman screamed. The old man dropped his trash. The delivery rider fell off his bike. Someone upstairs started praying. The movers ran into the street and refused to come back. Police arrived, then paramedics, then Mr. Lasky. The official explanation became hazardous reclaimed material, tenant distress, and a workplace removal accident. No report mentioned the names inside the stone. No report mentioned the way 12 people in an alley stood silently around it with their hands half raised. The slab was taken away by a city contractor. Daniel moved out 2 days later. He left behind dishes, furniture, food, rugs, and anything that had touched the kitchen. He threw away his clothes. He stopped using stone coasters, stone cutting boards, stone sinks, stone hotel vanities. He avoided butcher shops, hospitals, museums, and old lecture halls. Claire checked on him every night for a month. Mr. Lasky sold the building in spring. The apartment was renovated again. New cabinets, new floors, new listing photos. In the kitchen, the island was gone. A small wooden cart stood in its place with a bowl of lemons on top. Daniel tried to believe the story had ended. Almost 1 year later, Claire sent him a link with no message. It was an auction listing for reclaimed architectural stone. The photos showed broken marble pieces stacked in a warehouse outside Milwaukee. Most were plain gray and white. In the back of one image, half hidden behind a pallet, Daniel saw a pale fragment with a red vein running through it. The listing called it rare vintage marble, suitable for kitchens, bathrooms, bars, restaurants, reception desks, and custom family homes. Daniel called the auction company. He called the contractor. He called the city. Every person sounded bored. Records had been cleared. Materials had been released. Nothing illegal had happened. By the time anyone checked the lot number, the marble had sold. The buyer paid cash. The delivery address belonged to a renovated house in a quiet suburb. 3 bedrooms, 2 baths, new nursery, open concept kitchen. Daniel drove there once. He parked across the street at sunset and watched the house through his windshield. Warm lights glowed in the windows. A young couple carried grocery bags inside. A stroller sat on the porch. Through the kitchen window, Daniel saw a pale stone counter beneath hanging lights. There was a thin red line across it. He got out of the car. Before he reached the curb, the front door opened. The woman from the house stepped outside holding a dish towel around one finger. She looked confused, then strangely calm. Behind her, the man stood in the kitchen, staring down at the counter. Daniel took one step toward them. Then he saw something on the sidewalk beneath his feet. A red line ran through the concrete. It had not been there when he parked. He turned around. Another thin red vein crossed the curb. Another ran through a stone planter near the driveway. Another traced the edge of a neighbor's front step. Every piece of stone around the house had begun to mark itself. Daniel backed into the street, shaking. In the kitchen window, the young couple stood side by side, heads bowed, hands resting on the counter. Neither one moved. Daniel called 911 from his car. He did not stay long enough to see who answered the door. That is where the known story ends. The lesson is clear. Some objects carry more than age. A room used for one purpose long enough can teach that purpose to anything inside it. A stone used as a table for pain can learn patience. It can learn names. It can learn the quiet moment when people stop helping and start watching. Daniel survived because Claire broke the pull at the right time, but survival did not erase his name. The marble marked him. After that night, every stone surface near him had the potential to show the same thin red line. So the next time a renovated kitchen looks perfect and a polished counter has one warm red vein running through it, the question is direct. Is that stone part of a home, or has the home already become part of the table?